let's dive into something that's, well, it's incredibly complex and so often misunderstood. We're going to talk about the scarcity-of-love trap, and we're going to explore the deep psychology of why leaving a really bad situation can feel not just hard, but completely and utterly impossible.
The most striking truth about the scarcity-of-love trap is that your standards don't lower because you lack self-respect. They lower because your brain has been convinced that the world is a desert, and the person hurting you is the only oasis left. We usually just assume people stay in bad relationships because they must somehow like the drama. But in these really high-pressure dynamics, your own biological drive to avoid loss and nothingness gets used against you, turning a toxic situation into this precious commodity that you're absolutely terrified to lose.
So why? Why does the person who makes you feel the most miserable also feel like the only one who could ever possibly tolerate you? This right here is the central paradox of what the source material calls affectionate deprivation. It's that exact moment when your own survival-driven fear of scarcity gets twisted and becomes the very mechanism of your own psychological capture. It's how our brains get tricked into thinking isolation is actually a form of safety.
And that brings us to the big question for this whole explainer. Why does the cage feel like a shelter? How can a situation that causes so much pain also feel like the only source of security you have in the entire world? Okay, so here's our roadmap. We'll unpack this in 6 parts. We're going to start with that oasis in the desert paradox, then get into the psychological rules of the game. After that, we'll see how the cage is built, understand the deep psychology that makes it work, and then, importantly, we'll explore the path to seeing clearly and finally reclaiming your world. All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, the oasis in the desert. This is where we're really going to dig into that core contradiction, how our brains can literally be trained to see deep, profound isolation as a form of safety. And look, the most crucial thing to get right away is that this has nothing to do with some personality flaw or someone liking the drama. It's about a cognitive shift, a change in your thinking that is pretty much engineered to completely bypass your sense of self-worth. It just systematically replaces a world of possibilities with a manufactured, artificial sense of scarcity, making you feel grateful for the very thing that's hurting you. Okay, let's move on to Section 2, the rules of the game. Here, we're going to look at the psychological bedrock that makes this whole trap not just possible, but incredibly effective. It really all starts with this powerful concept from behavioral economics called loss aversion. As you can see here, the pain of losing something feels psychologically about twice as strong as the pleasure of gaining that exact same thing. This powerful built-in bias, well, that's the fertile ground where the scarcity-of-love trap gets planted. Your brain is just hardwired to avoid loss, even if what you're about to lose is actually causing you pain. And this dynamic isn't just about romance. Not at all. We see it in all kinds of high-pressure systems. In some families, you might hear things like, no one else will ever put up with you. In a toxic job, a boss might convince you you're unhireable anywhere else, just to keep you there. And in these really enmeshed relationships, the message becomes, your market value is 0. The goal is always the same. Make right now seem like your only option.
And this environment creates 2 really specific belief patterns. First, there's the deflation hook, where you actually start to see someone's pity, their supposed tolerance for your flaws, as some kind of grand, heroic love. And that leads right to standard atrophy. Your whole perspective just flips. You stop asking, is this good for me? And you start asking a much, much more dangerous question. Is this better than nothing? The bar doesn't just get lowered, it basically vanishes.
This really shows the critical mindset shift right here. In a healthy situation, you're in a mode of active evaluation. You're judging someone by what they consistently do. But inside the trap, you slip into passive retention. Your main goal just becomes preventing abandonment at any cost. You start letting go of totally legitimate issues. You silence your own needs, not because they aren't real, but because bringing them up carries the threat of being left with that nothingness you've been conditioned to fear so much.
Over time, this can lead to a state the source material calls relational vertigo. It's this really disorienting feeling where you just stop noticing the mistreatment. And why? Because the outside world has been painted so effectively as a place that is totally disgusted by you, a place that has already rejected you. In this state, you can genuinely start to feel lucky to be mistreated by someone you know, because the alternative seems so much worse, being rejected by a whole world you believe hates you. So how is this cage actually put together? Let's get into Section 3, building the cage. we're going to break down the very specific, systematic, three-step mechanism that's behind this whole thing.
So the process usually follows these three distinct phases. First, positioning themselves as the unique witness. Then, it moves into market poisoning. And finally, it all gets locked into place with breadcrumbing consolidation. Let's take a look at each one.
So phase one is the unique witness. This is where the controller finds your deepest insecurities, your biggest flaws. But instead of attacking you with them right away, they frame their acceptance of these flaws as some kind of unique, special gift. They position themselves as the only person on Earth who could possibly understand and tolerate the real you. And this is all designed to test your value deflation threshold. Basically, how willing are you to let someone else define your worth for you downwards?
And the feeling this creates is captured so perfectly in this quote. You feel deeply understood, but strangely small, right? There's a part of you that feels truly seen, maybe for the first time, but at the exact same time, your world, your confidence, your sense of agency, it all starts to shrink.
So once that foundation is solid, the process shifts to phase two, market poisoning. Now the focus changes from "I'm the only one who accepts you" to "everyone else out there is actively hostile to you." The controller starts to rebrand the entire outside world as being disgusted by you, which triggers our deep biological isolation drive and makes you cling to them as your one and only safe harbor.
And that brings us to the final phase, the one that really locks it all in, breadcrumbing consolidation. Now that you feel isolated, devalued, and alone, the controller waits until you are at your absolute lowest point. And at that exact moment, they offer a tiny little micro-reward, just a small crumb of warmth or validation. But because your brain is basically in a state of starvation, it doesn't see a crumb. No, it sees magnificent proof of love, which reinforces the whole twisted cycle and slams the door shut.
So that's the mechanism. But why? Why is it so ridiculously powerful? In Section 4, The Psychology of Scarcity, we're going to explore what's happening inside the brain that makes this lock-in so brutally effective.
What's really fascinating here is how the motivations of both people just click together perfectly to sustain this. The controller's goal is what the source calls total retention. If they can own your sense of your own value, they get absolute leverage over you. And on the other side, the target's vulnerability is often a very real, very deep need for safety. When you've been made to feel totally isolated, the need for just having someone, anyone, can start to feel way more urgent than the need for being respected.
And this whole thing plugs directly into a biological reality, the scarcity heuristic. Our brains are just wired to put a huge premium on anything we think is rare. We find it almost impossible to let go of a resource we see as scarce, even if that resource is toxic. When you truly believe that this one person is the only water in a massive desert, your survival instinct will scream at you to protect that source, no matter what. Okay, we've laid out the trap, the mechanism, and the psychology behind it. Now the tone is going to shift. In Section 5, The Path to Seeing, we're going to talk about the very first steps toward awareness and recognition. This is all about how you start to see the bars of the cage for what they really are.
You know, awareness doesn't begin with a big fight or a huge confrontation. It starts with a simple, private, internal tool, the market reality audit. It's not about fighting back. It's just about observing. It's a tool for describing what you see, where you just begin to ask yourself if your value is really some fixed number that can be decided by one person's opinion.
And the core question of this whole audit is right here. You start asking yourself, is what I'm getting here genuine protection, or is it actually monopolization? Is this person really keeping me safe from a harsh world, or are they just creating a monopoly on my time, my affection, and my self-worth to make sure I have absolutely nowhere else to go? So once you start auditing your own internal reality, the next logical step is to develop what's called external mirror awareness. If the story you're being told inside the relationship is distorted, you need an objective reflection from the outside world to get your perspective back and see things as they are.
So, how do you do that? Well, as you can see, it means intentionally putting yourself in new environments. Join a class, reconnect with old friends you trust. The key thing is to enter neutral spaces where the controller's story about you just doesn't exist. See how other people react to you. This gives you real-world data that can directly challenge the manufactured reality you've been living in. Ultimately, taking back your power, your sovereignty, it all starts with one simple, powerful thought that you keep to yourself. I am not a project.
You are not something broken that needs to be fixed or tolerated by one special person. Just recognizing that truth begins to interrupt the whole neurochemical cycle of the trap. It's the very first step to breaking the spell.
And that brings us to our final section, reclaiming your world. Let's pull all this together and talk about the core lesson, the big picture takeaway from this entire dynamic.
If there's one thing to remember about the scarcity of love trap, it's this. The most dangerous cages are not made of steel bars. They're made of the belief that nothing else exists. The trap only works by shrinking your entire world, your whole perception of reality, until the cage is all you can see.
And this leads us to the most important takeaway of all. Someone who loves you doesn't try to make the world look smaller just to make themselves look bigger. Real love, real support, a real partnership, it expands your world. It introduces you to new people, new ideas, new possibilities. It doesn't shrink your entire life down to an audience of one.
The core manipulation of this trap is to convince you the world is a tiny, hostile, scary place. But the fundamental truth is, the world is wider. It is so much wider than they want you to believe. And awareness, that's the first step to seeing it again.